years, she has been the most celebrated cook in 3 villages, her secret buried deeper than any grave. But tonight, as she serves her famous jollof rice to the village chief's wedding, she doesn't know that her own daughter has followed her to the mortuary and seen everything. The water she uses to cook, the same water used to wash dead bodies, is about to destroy everything she has built. How it started? The sun had not yet kissed the earth when Mama Wumi's compound already buzzed with the sound of grinding stones and bubbling pots. Smoke rose from her outdoor kitchen like incense to the gods, carrying with it the sweet smell of palm oil, fresh tomatoes, and something else. Something that made her food different from every other woman's cooking in Abeokuta. Mama Wumi, Mama Wumi. Young boys ran through the dusty paths between mud houses, their bare feet kicking up red earth as they carried her reputation from compound to compound. Chief Adebayo wants 50 portions of your jollof rice for his daughter's wedding. He said he will pay any price. Wumi smiled as she tied her wrapper tighter around her waist. At 45, she was still a beautiful woman with skin like polished ebony and hands that seemed to work magic with every ingredient they touched. But her eyes held secrets that would make the strongest man's blood run cold. "Tell the chief his rice will be ready before the sun reaches the middle of the sky," she called out, her voice carrying the confidence of a woman who had never failed to deliver perfection. Her neighbor, Mama Kemi, looked over the low fence that separated their compounds with envy burning in her chest like pepper soup. Every day, people are praising your cooking," Mama Kemi said, her voice sweet like honey but bitter like bitter leaf. "What is your secret, my sister? We all use the same market, the same palm oil, the same rice, yet your food tastes like it was prepared by the ancestors themselves." Wumi's smile never faltered, but her hand paused for just a moment as she reached for her wooden spoon. "My secret is love, Mama Kemi. I cook with love and I pray over every grain of rice." But love was not her secret. As the morning sun climbed higher, painting the village in golden light, customers began to gather outside Wumi's compound. Market women clutched their money tight, their children pressed against their wrappers as the smell of her cooking made their stomachs cry out like hungry babies. "Mama Wumi, give me 2 portions of rice and some of that pepper soup that cured my husband's malaria," called out Auntie Bisola, counting her naira notes with trembling fingers. "I want the pounded yam that made Senator Ogundipe write that letter praising your cooking in the newspaper," shouted another customer. One by one, Wumi served them, watching their faces transform with the first taste. Their eyes would close, their heads would shake in wonder, and without fail, they would ask the same question that haunted her dreams. "Mama Wumi, what do you put in this food?" What she put in her food was a secret that started 15 years ago on the darkest night of her life. But as the sun reached its peak and the last customer walked away satisfied, Wumi didn't notice the small figure hiding behind the mango tree at the edge of her compound. She didn't see her 15-year-old daughter Foloke's eyes wide with curiosity and suspicion. And she definitely didn't know that tonight, when she made her secret journey, she would not be alone. The water she needed was waiting for her at the mortuary, just as it had been every month for 15 years. But this time, the price of her secret was about to become higher than she ever imagined. What secret drove Mama Wumi to the mortuary every month? And what will happen when her own daughter discovers the truth behind the village's most beloved looked cook? Folake pressed her body against the rough bark of the mango tree, her heart beating like talking drums in her chest. She had been watching her mother for 3 weeks now, ever since she noticed something strange about the way Mama Wumi disappeared every full moon. Where does she go when she thinks everyone is sleeping? Folake whispered to herself, her young mind spinning with questions that kept her awake at night. Everyone in the village called her mother a cooking goddess. Teachers at school would stop their lessons just to talk about Mama Wumi's food. Even the pastor at their church had once said during Sunday service that God must have blessed her hands with special anointing. But Folake knew her mother better than anyone else. She had watched those same hands shake sometimes when she thought nobody was looking. She had seen her mother wake up in the middle of the night, sweating like she had been running, her lips moving in whispers that sounded more like begging than praying. "Folake, come and help me wash these plates." Her mother's voice cut through her thoughts like a sharp knife. The girl jumped down from where she had been hiding and ran to the outdoor kitchen where her mother stood surrounded by empty pots and plates. The smell of the day's cooking still hung in the air, making Folake's stomach growl despite the fear that was growing inside her chest. "Mama, can I ask you something?" Folake said as she picked up a sponge and began scrubbing a pot that had held the famous pepper soup. Mama Wumi's shoulders tensed, but she kept her voice light. "What is it, my daughter?" "Where do you get water for cooking? I mean, our well is the same as everyone else's well. Our neighbors fetch from the same stream. But somehow your food tastes different. Even the water you use to cook rice, it's like magic." The pot Mama Wumi was holding slipped from her hands and crashed to the ground, breaking into 3 pieces. The sound echoed through the compound like a gunshot. "Look what you have made me do with your foolish questions," Mama Wumi snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Water is water, Folake. Stop asking stupid questions and help me pick up these pieces before someone steps on them." But as they knelt together to gather the broken pottery, Folake saw something she had never seen before in her mother's eyes. Fear. Raw, naked fear that made her mother's hands shake as she picked up each piece. That night, as the village settled into sleep, and the only sounds were crickets singing their night songs and distant drums from a celebration 3 compounds away, Folake lay on her mat with her ears wide open. She heard her mother's breathing change from the deep rhythm of sleep to the quick, shallow breaths of someone who was awake but pretending to sleep. She heard the soft creak of their wooden door opening. She heard her mother's footsteps, careful and quiet, moving away from their house. Folake waited until she could no longer hear the footsteps. Then she rose like a ghost and followed. The full moon hung in the sky like a silver coin, casting long shadows between the houses as Folake moved through the sleeping village. Her mother was ahead of her, a dark figure moving with purpose through paths that Folake had never seen her take before. They walked for what felt like hours, leaving the village behind and entering the old part of town where the buildings were different, where the government had built the hospital, the police station, and the mortuary. Folake's blood turned to ice water in her veins as she watched her mother approach the mortuary building, the place where dead bodies were kept, the place where the village elders said evil spirits danced at midnight. "What is my mother doing at the house of the dead?" she whispered, her voice so quiet it was lost in the wind. Through a window, she could see yellow light from a kerosene lamp dancing on the walls inside. She could see her mother talking to someone, a tall, thin man whose face was hidden in shadow. She could see money changing hands. And then she saw something that would haunt her dreams forever. her mother filled a large jerry can with water from a tap inside the mortuary. The same tap she had seen them use to wash dead bodies when her grandfather died 2 years ago. The same water that touched corpses, that cleaned away the stains of death, that carried the spirits of the departed. That was the water her mother used to cook the food that the whole village praised. Folak's legs gave way beneath her and she fell to her knees behind a bush, her stomach churning like a pot of boiling oil. Everything she thought she knew about her mother, about their success, about the respect their family enjoyed in the village, all of it was built on this terrible secret. As Mama Wumi began her journey back home with the jerry can balanced on her head, Folake realized that her life had just changed forever. She now carried a secret that could destroy everything her family had built. But what she didn't know was that someone else had been watching too, someone whose own heart was now filled with plans for revenge. How long can a daughter keep such a terrible secret? And who else knows about Mama Wumi's midnight visits to the mortuary? The man who had been watching from the old iroko tree behind the mortuary smiled like a hungry hyena as he saw both women disappear into the darkness. His name was Baba Tunde, and he was the only native doctor in the village whose powers had never been able to match Mama Wumi's cooking success. For 15 years, customers had abandoned his healing soups and protection stews for Mama Wumi's food. For 15 years, he had wondered how a simple woman with no training in the ancient ways could create such powerful effects with ordinary ingredients. Tonight, he finally had his answer. "So, Mama Wumi," he whispered, his voice like dried leaves rustling in harmattan wind, "you think you can use the water of the dead, and nobody will discover your secret? You have been feeding this village with abomination, and now I will make you pay." Baba Tunda had his own reasons for coming to the mortuary that night. The mortuary attendant, Segun, owed him money he had borrowed to buy herbs for his sick mother. But instead of collecting his debt, Baba Tunde had stumbled upon something much more valuable than coins. He had watched Mama Wumi hand over crisp naira notes to Segun. He had seen Segun unlock the back door and lead her to the washing room where the dead were prepared. He had seen her fill her container with the cursed water that had touched more corpses than anyone could count. 15 years, Babatunde counted on his fingers, his mind calculating like a mathematician. 15 years of using death water to cook for the living. The ancestors must be very angry, very, very angry. As he climbed down from the tree, his joints creaking like old wood, Babatunde's mind was already spinning plans. He could expose her secret and watch her reputation crumble like sand. He could blackmail her for money until she had nothing left, or he could wait and let the ancestors handle their own justice. But what Babatunde didn't know was that the ancestors were already stirring. 3 days after Folake discovered her mother's secret, the first sign appeared during the preparation for Chief Adebayo's daughter's wedding feast. Mama Wumi stood in her kitchen at dawn, the familiar jerry can of mortuary water hidden behind sacks of rice where no one would think to look. The wedding order was her biggest ever, food for 300 guests, including politicians from the state capital and businessmen from Lagos. "Today will make us rich enough to build the new house I have been dreaming of," she told herself as she poured the death water into her largest pot. "Just like always. Nobody will know, and everyone will praise my cooking to the heavens." But as the water touched the bottom of the pot, something strange happened. The water, which had always been clear before, turned dark like mud. Not just dark, It turned the color of dried blood, and it began to bubble even though no fire was beneath it. What is happening? Mama Wumi stepped back, her heart jumping in her chest like a grasshopper trying to escape from a bottle. The smell that rose from the pot was not the smell of clean water. It was the smell of something rotten, something that had been dead for a very long time. It was the smell of every corpse that water had ever touched, all rising up at once like spirits awakening from their graves. Folake, who had been pretending to sleep on her mat in the corner, opened her eyes and saw her mother standing frozen like a statue, staring at the pot with terror written across her face like words in a book. "Mama, what is wrong?" Folake asked, though she already knew the answer would be a lie. "Nothing, nothing," Mama Wumi said quickly, but her voice shook like leaves in a storm. "Go back to sleep. I just need to change this water. Maybe our well is having problems today." But as she poured out the dark water, it left black stains on the ground that looked exactly like the shape of human bodies. And when she filled the pot with regular water from their well, the rice she cooked came out tasteless, as flat and boring as everyone else's rice in the village. The wedding feast was a disaster. For the first time in 15 years, people left food on their plates. Chief Adebayo himself spat out the first bite of jollof rice and called for his cook to prepare something else. The pepper soup that usually cured all sickness made 3 people vomit before they could swallow it. "What has happened to your food, Mama Wumi?" asked Auntie Bisola, her face twisted with disappointment. "This rice tastes like it was cooked by someone who has never been in a kitchen before." That night, Mama Wumi lay awake on her mat, staring at the ceiling and trying to understand what was going wrong. In 15 years, the deaf water had never failed her. It had always made her food special, always brought customers running to her door with money in their hand. What she didn't know was that, in the darkness outside her window, Baba Tunde was sitting under the mango tree, sprinkling special powders and whispering incantations that would make the spirits of the dead restless. He was calling on every soul whose body had been washed with that water, asking them to visit the woman who had been using their sacred washing water for her own profit. "Let her feel what it means to disturb the sleep of the dead," he whispered to the night air. "Let her understand that some shortcuts lead to roads with no return." The next morning brought news that made Mama Wumi's blood run cold. Mrs. Adeyemi, the woman who had eaten the most pepper soup at the failed wedding feast, was found dead in her bed. No sickness, no injury. She had simply stopped breathing in her sleep, with a look of terror frozen on her face. Then came Mr. Ogundipe, the retired teacher who had praised Mama Wumi's cooking for years. He collapsed at the market while buying tomatoes, his last words being, the taste in my mouth, it tastes like death." By the 3rd day, 5 people who had eaten at the wedding were dead, and the whole village was buzzing with fear and questions. "Something is very wrong," whispered the market women as they gathered around the village well. 5 healthy people don't just die like this. Someone has brought evil upon our village. Folake could no longer bear the weight of her mother's secret. She had watched her mother's hands shake as she cooked. She had seen the tears her mother thought she was hiding. She had heard her mother talking to herself in the middle of the night, begging forgiveness from people whose names Folake didn't recognize. That evening, as her mother sat outside their compound staring at nothing, Folake made the decision that would change everything. "Mama," she said, her voice barely louder than the evening breeze, "I know about the water, Mama Wumi's head snapped around so fast that Folake thought her mother's neck might break. What? What water? What are you talking about? The water from the mortuary. The water you have been using to cook for 15 years. I followed you, Mama. I saw everything. The sound that came from Mama Wumi's throat was not quite a scream and not quite a cry. It was the sound of a woman whose world had just crumbled into dust around her feet. You don't understand, Mama Wumi whispered, grabbing her daughter's hands, with fingers that felt as cold as death itself. You don't know what I had to do to save us, to make us survive in this wicked world. Then tell me, Mama, tell me why you chose to cook with water from dead bodies. Tell me why people are dying after eating your food. Tell me everything before it's too late for both of us. And in the fading light of that terrible day, with the spirits of the dead gathering like storm clouds around their compound, Mama Wumi finally began to tell the story of how she had sold her soul for success.